So I've been exploring a new way to organize content on my app without leaving the context that you're on. So I came up with the idea of stacks. Stacks are more or less what they sound like. You group items in place and then you can expand and collapse without ever leaving the context that you're on. So for this to work well, the context needs to be very evident. The items need to come from the place that they're on and animate smoothly into the expanded stack. So that was the challenge that I worked on. Now it's important to understand that these type of interactions can be intimidating at first if you've never done them before. After all, those animations look pretty awesome, right? Well, this is a great example of AI just helping out and getting started with a prototype. Right off the bat, it didn't quite look like what you just saw. It's very basic, but with a little bit of feedback and understanding of the platform, meaning you definitely need to do your research, you can land in a really good spot. Take a look. You'll notice that the proportions are not quite transitioning the way that we would probably want them to, but at this point I hadn't really written much code. Even without the help of AI, most of the animation itself is handled by SwiftUI. All I have to do is provide how I want things to start and how I want things to end. And quite frankly, even though I still wanted to improve the way in which the animation looked and the proportions that I just mentioned, mainly I just cared about creating this transition and feeling like I'm making progress. There was just a couple of things to stress test before I moved on from the prototype into the actual implementation. First, I tested different positions, basically having different starting points of the transition to make sure that it just works from different places on the screen. And of course, make sure that it works just as well on iOS. I really enjoy writing code by hand, but there was definitely a lot to take in to go from just having cards on the grid and start stacking them. So I definitely asked Cursor, my new friend, to help me out here to bridge the gaps. The result was kind of ridiculous. I mean, the stacks didn't really look like they were on top of each other and it was kind of messy. But that's kind of the point. I was making progress and I was saving time. If you're wondering, Cursor is a code editor that you can give prompts to and it understands your code base, so it can give better suggestions along the way. It's not a replacement for the knowledge that you gain as an engineer, but this definitely saves me a lot of time. Slowly but surely, the implementation started to look a lot more like the design. There was definitely a stacking going on. I just needed to make the stack a little bit more interactive so that the user knows that it's clickable and give a sense of what you can do with it. A simple animation having the items space out from each other on hover should do the trick. Now it started to look a little bit closer to what I had in mind, except that the stack was kind of reversed, so I needed to fix that. It is a little bit funny when you want to change something with AI and turns out that the suggestion is just a one-line code of change. I definitely was a little bit embarrassed by that. But it worked, and not only did it work, but now I had stacks. And it's hard to understand without looking at the code, but now I had different cards that can be on top of each other as a collective card. How cool is that? This now means that I was ready to finally work on the transition to the expanded stack. This is where the humans win. I could not get AI to write the code that I needed in order to coordinate all the transition between the collapsed and the expanded state, but it did write some boilerplate code for me. Which brings us to the most exciting part of the video. Look at that not so great looking but functional stack. You know this guy's happy. So with the newfound confidence and determination, the last three things to do are add more visual variety. This way we get a better representation of how this might be used. Play with a little bit of tint so you can distinguish the foreground from the background, which at that point made more sense to add a little bit of blur. And yes, we still need to fix that weird height, which by the way was the easiest part. If you would like to see more of this type of content, please consider subscribing. This is going to support my journey as an indie developer and support the work that I do. Thank you.